Hello everybody, welcome into my latest live feed. Today is Wednesday, October the 2nd, 2019. My name is Carey Holzman. Thank you all for joining me. I'm getting a little bit earlier scheduled start just to make sure audio and video are in sync and give people a few moments to jump into the chat so we can start more or less on time. So in the meantime, I hope everybody's doing well. My thanks to Trudy Brooks for her $10 contribution and Chester Hughes for the $2 contribution. Thanks you guys for supporting the channel. I'm going to be doing what should be a quick review of a NVMe SSD enclosure. I've shown about 3 of these in the past from Silverstone, Orico, and Sabrent, and I've got a new one here from a company called Plugable. Now, everything about this product where you can purchase it is all in the video notes below the video. And I think, like on my Amazon page, and I don't know if this works worldwide, but on my Amazon page, as of October the 2nd, 2019, it does show a little option to click a coupon for an instant $10 off, which brings us to $39.99. Is it worth it? Will I like it? We're about to find out here in just a moment. But first, let's give people time to respond to the notification that I've gone live and give people a chance to jump on in. And for those of you that are already here, welcome in. Always good to see everybody again. Happy I've got my Michigan shirt on, so yes. Let me grab my keyboard and mouse here. And let's say hello to the folks that are joining us here in the chat early. Eddie Casanova, Jesse Kirk, PC Fishing, Joe P, Jatesh, Mark Baggett, Trudy Brooks, Chester Hughes, Nick Poverman, who says there are no screws required on this enclosure. So apparently no screws, no tools. That'd be a welcome change, because it's usually where I struggle with some of these units. Screws strip out, they get dropped, they get lost, need a special screwdriver, etc., etc. Bordura Catalin says, hello, hey Bordura. Luke Agrinia, Mark Baggett, Stealth Mode, and John Peck, Craig Dollar, David Williams, John Craig, Greg McDonald, Stephen Boker, and Paul Wright. All great friends of the channel. Thanks, you guys. Friendly faces, familiar faces. Always good to see you in the chat. Makes me feel like I'm talking to somebody I know, which is means I can lower the defenses a little bit. So in the meantime, we got about 137 watching now. Simple Tech says, it's been a rough week. My health isn't all that great. I'm sorry to hear that, but hopefully you will get that in check. Follow your doctor's orders. Hope you start to feel better soon. Dimitri says hello, and Dwayne Phillip is hello. Rico Nam has said, I bought a Q9 enclosure last year and it worked. All these enclosures I've used have worked, but some of them have been difficult to open up or to put together. Sometimes you can get parts, no indication of which way is up or right side versus the front side from the back side. That has been sort of the main complaint I've had. My favorite NVMe to USB enclosure that I've tested so far, and bear in mind, you know, once you put the NVMe drive in it, these issues are resolved until you have to open it up again. But my favorite one is the Sabrent one. I think I've bought about 4 of those, and I've given 3 of them away as gifts to people. My sister got one, and she's like, this just changed my life. I didn't realize how much time I was spending what I consider to be normal, moving data from my phone to back it up. And this thing happens in seconds. It's like a whole life-changing, like it just do it and get on with your life. So that makes me happy. And the thing, you know, is pretty heavy. It's like a large heatsink with that you put an M.2 drive, NVMe drive in. And so I guess the dissipation of the heat is excellent on it. I don't know, but it's the largest of all the units, the most expensive of all the units. They all performed about the same. These units, in general, will transfer data about 1,000 megabytes a second on reads and writes sequentially using Crystal Disk Mark. If you're plugging it into a modern USB 3.1 Gen 2 USB port. You'll know if you've got that because you just look at your documentation. Look for the little Type-C USB port, it's smaller than other ones. And even if you're running at your regular USB 3.1 or 3.0 speeds, it's still much, much faster than other external devices. That being said, there's no need to buy an outrageously fast NVMe drive. There's no reason to put a Samsung 970 or 970 Pro, because it'll never achieve the speeds that the Samsung 970 can achieve when it's installed on a motherboard with full access to PCIe 4.0 by 4 lanes. PCIe 3.0 by 4, what it's called. We also call it NVMe. But NVMe can also have different protocols for PCI 4.0, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In the meantime, going through the USB port, that pretty much maxes out, without moving then into Thunderbolt, I guess. 1,000 megabytes per second is all we can do today. So the limitation is on the USB port. It is not with the NVMe drive or the enclosure necessarily. So for that reason, I would recommend an Intel 660p of any size. Intel 660p. They have NVMe drives that are PCI Express 3.0 times 4, which is what you want. And they peak out, when they're installed in a motherboard, they peak out about 2,000 megabytes a second on the reads and the writes. So it's going to run at about half speed in this enclosure or in any USB enclosure with the best possible, fastest USB 3.1 Gen 2 port available. So spending any more money on that was just a waste of money as far as the NVMe drive goes. So I'd say spend half the amount of money. The Intel 660p is about half the price of a Samsung 970 series. And the great thing about these external drives is if your drive should fail, or if you want to upgrade it and go larger to a larger capacity, unlike a flash drive, you don't just toss it into a drawer and buy a new one. You could just simply open the unit up, pop the M.2 drive out of it, put a new one in there, and off you go. It's really that simple. So repairs with regards to failing drives and upgrades are possible that are not possible with USB flash drives. Now, USB flash drives are going to be a bit smaller, so there is always a sacrifice that you pay for that, which means a higher price, no upgradability, no repairability on a USB flash drive. With this, you go about 3 times larger, I'd say, but you can still connect with a cable, so you don't have to worry about this big, sometimes USB flash drives can get kind of wide and they don't quite fit without bumping into other things in the back of your computer or the side of a laptop. And so with a unit like this, you just have a cable, so you don't have any fitment issues. So with that, just take a look here real quick in the chat. We've got about 300 people in the chat right now. Do I like virtual reality? That's what Trinecraft wants to know. I've never quite understood the fascination with virtual reality, because if we lived on Mars and you were wondering what it was like to go outside on Earth, that would be a great way to virtually experience it. When you use the word virtual, I want you to think of the word pretend. That's another word for pretend. So you're asking me, do I like to play pretend? In general, no. I much prefer to actually experience things in real life. I find it's much more exhilarating. For example, when you're in a racing car simulation, there's no sense of G-forces or cornering or acceleration of the car breaking free. It's numb. It's like you're on painkillers. Everything is numb and it lacks any feeling. If you're fighting a virtual fire, there's no heat coming off of that you can feel. If you're in a virtual fight, there's no hits. There's no satisfaction of landing a punch. There's no feedback. And without the feedback, it's numb and lifeless. So that being said, a little bit of VR now and again is kind of fun. When we were at Dave & Buster's, they had a virtual reality video game there it had several games within it. And we played the Men in Black game, which was pretty darn cool. And we played the Star Trek game. So you get to look around and you're on the bridge of this Enterprise, and you look at the person sitting next to you and you see somebody in a Star Trek uniform. That is pretty cool. And after about 12 minutes of that, I've had enough. You know what I mean? Like it's fun, but it's nothing I would want to do all the time. And of course, there are practical educational purposes for VR, but they're very niche, very, very limited, but they certainly have their place. That being said, Randall Hill just contributed $2. He says, "Sup, Uncle Carey." Sup, Randall. All right, let's start this review. Let's take a look at what we've got going on here. What I'm holding in my hands, these aren't my feet, in case you were wondering. These are my hands. This is the Plugable USB 3.1 Gen 2 NVMe SSD enclosure. Was that English? Pretty sure that was English. USB, Universal Serial Bus, 3.1, Generation 2. Non-volatile Memory Express, solid state drive, enclosure. With me? Let's see what's in here. I've never unboxed this. Everything is unrehearsed and unscripted. Everything is real, not virtual. Everything is real on my channels. I hope this goes well. This is nice. They have a little thing there, a little card. If you're having trouble, contact us. They're not hiding. That's always a good thing. We've got some instructions, which I don't think I'm going to need. My test of a good product is that I do not have to read the instructions, that it is intuitive, and it builds on previous experience with similar devices. Here's the unit itself. Now, for comparison's sake, this is a flash drive. So you can see it's quite a bit bigger than a flash drive. Whereas this flash drive is, 64 gigs, 128 gigs, 256 gigs. This can be whatever size we put in there. So I can put in, for example, a 2 terabyte Intel 660p for $180. And I can have 2 terabytes of super, super fast solid state USB storage, much, much faster than a flash drive. And again, repairable. If the drive were to fail, I can replace it. And upgradable. If the drive were to become too small, I can put a larger drive in it. Now, this is supposed to be toolless. I do believe on the other side of this box should be our cables, right? Because we have to be able to plug it in some way. Let's see. Yeah, so we've got a USB-C to just normal USB adapter cable and USB-C to C right there. And then we've got some, what may be a little heat sink and some little standoffs in this bag, which appear to be for fitment of perhaps, not exactly sure, there's 3 of them in there. Not sure. Hopefully these things are all optional. Now, the only NVMe drive I've got spare laying around the office is this Western Digital Black. This is a 500 gig drive, and this thing is screaming fast. And it's a shame to put a screaming fast NVMe drive in a solid state enclosure, once again, because the limitation of performance is going to be the USB port at about 1,000 megabytes a second. So any NVMe drive that achieves 1,000 megabytes or better is going to go 1,000 megabytes if you plug it into a USB 3.1 Gen 2 port on your computer. So A. Reynolds just contributed $2. He says, "Greetings from Virginia." And Daniel Quintrell has contributed £2. Thanks to both of you for supporting the channel. I appreciate that very much. So let me get my Western Digital Black. You've seen me use this drive in the past. I believe I formatted it and everything. It should just be like new. We'll set that right there. Let's get a little zoom in on what I'm doing. Hang on for a minute. Let's get closer. Let's go right there. And some arrows here, which I guess means you pull, or do you squeeze? Don't know. So you can see I am sort of squeezing in on these and lifting on the cap. I think that's how you do it. Maybe not. I'm missing something here. Oh, I see. On the back of the unit, it's got a lock. And right now it's locked closed. So we move the switch to the unlocked position, and it automatically just kind of, you do it again so you can watch. I'm just figuring this out. Remember, I'm not looking at the manual. I'm trying to make sure this is all intuitive. So there's the switch, and I'm just going to press the switch and watch the top. That's pretty easy so far. Flip it around the other side. And we've already got a little rubber standoff right there in the position I believe we need it in. So I will grab the M.2 drive. We're off to a really good start here, folks. This is a real good start. No screwdriver, no tools, no screws. Place the M.2 drive in the slot, the label facing up. It is keyed, so it only goes in one way. You can't get it wrong. And then I guess we have to like move this little rubber grommet thingy. Oh, well, that was easy. That's the easiest one I've ever done. That's a good sign. Well, we're done. Now we can just slide it back into the case. Once again, my concern on these is if there's a right side up, which I don't know. Can it go in backwards? What's the first way I try it? Backwards, apparently. I'm going to turn this around. Well, maybe not. Probably because the lock. Is that what's keeping me held up? Oh, maybe I see. If anybody can get it backwards, it's me. So the side that has the arrow, I was using the other side. That's just the way I am. And we're going to align that with the other arrow. And it's on both sides, so I don't know, once again, if I can get it backwards. That side's not going. Let's turn it around. Let's try it this way. There it goes. So I'm not quite sure if that matters or not. A little struggle getting it back in. And then we'll just slide that back together. Like so. We're done. At this point, we can start testing it. So let me pull the camera back a bit. And let me grab I'll use my laptop here so I can do the screen capture. And let's turn this on. It should be already hooked up to the video capture card, so just give it a second to boot up. And while we're waiting, I'll grab the USB-C to C cable, because that's what I've got on the laptop, USB-C. And this laptop also has Thunderbolt, which is USB-C compatible, same connector. They are doing a great job making technology really, really confusing, right? And then I gotta find it. Somewhere on this laptop I have a USB-C port. Here it is. Plug that in, like so. Do I have any LEDs on this? Yes, there's a small blue LED. It's probably too far away for you guys to see it. And it's blinking on and off, and it's right beside where the USB cable plugs in. I always like to see some sort of read-write activity light, because you never want to unplug any USB device that's in the middle of a read or write cycle, or you could corrupt it. So now this has opened up a folder that has Windows on it. And I'm just going to leave it. I think I installed Windows 10 on there. So for now, let me see if I can switch us over to this input so you can see what I'm seeing. Where are you? Okay, so that's my new wallpaper. Lake Michigan. Okay, now let me run Crystal Disk Mark. Should be the 64-bit edition. Let's select. So by default, it's going to select your C drive. We want to select this D drive. And we want to run all tests. And let's see what kind of performance numbers that we're going to see out of this bad boy. So far, the price is right. The quality of the materials, I don't feel anything plastic on the outside. The enclosure seems It's all metal except the top part that plugs in, I think, is plastic, but the main part of it is metal, so it's good protection. Numbers a little bit disappointing at 860. I expect to see closer to 1,000. And part of that could be a driver-related issue with the laptop until I get another machine with USB-C Gen 2, USB-C 3.1 Gen 2. I'd have to compare it, to be fair, to make sure it's not a limitation of the laptop. Oh, I know another way I can do it. I can grab my Sabrent USB enclosure, which I do believe I've got in my office. And if it's achieving the same numbers, that'll answer that, right? That's one way to tell. I just have to find it. I know I had set it. Was this it? Oh, I got it. All right, easy peasy. Also, the USB cable that comes included with these units, sometimes that USB cable can be a bit lacking, and by changing the USB cable to a third-party, much more quality cable may result in a performance difference. So let me grab another USB-C type cable, which I have around here somewhere. Is this my USB-C? No. How about here? What did I do with it? And those little USB-C to C Gen 2, you know, USB 3.1 compatible, those little cables can be quite pricey. I think this cable set me back $23, $27 for a cable. But USB cables, I'll tell you what, you don't want to go cheap on one if you care about performance. There's been a number of articles written where they have tested these USB cables and found many of them to not meet what they say they are compatible with or what their performance is. Let's see, what did I do with that USB? I got it around somewhere. We're just letting that test run anyway, so bear with me as we see these test results and how they turn out. I might actually have one in here. We're not. Yeah, that's not the cable I was looking for. Well, you know what? Silverstone sent me some of those cables. Maybe I'll use one of those new ones. Don't mind me while I talk to myself. Another day in Carey land. Huh. You know, it's a problem that you've got too much stuff. Can't find what you need, but you can find everything that you don't. Oh. I have another USB 3.1 cable I can try, although it's not exactly what I was going for. That's fine. So there's our final numbers. We're at about 860 on the reads, 800 on the writes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to replace the cable, the USB-C cable, with one that came with another unit. The device is pretty warm to my touch just from that test. We're going to plug it in with a different cable just to see how it performs here. So we're going to run the test one more time, completely different cable from a different manufacturer. And I just want to do the sequential tests and we'll see how it performs. Of course, it's dead silent. There's no moving parts. That's the other advantage. You don't have to worry about bumping into it or knocking into it like you do with an external hard drive. Yeah, it looks pretty consistent. So it doesn't appear to be a cable issue. So the next thing I'm going to do, we can just stop this test. I've seen enough of that test stop. And then, yeah, so we're in the 800s. I expect the thousands. That's why I'm digging a little deeper here. Let's go back to, let's unplug this drive, and then this is the cable I had put on there. I'll put the cable that it came with. Doesn't matter which side of the cable you use, they're both the same. And to be fair, I'm going to use the Sabrent drive. This is the much bigger drive. I believe I've got the Intel 660p in here, which is a slower drive than the one I put in here. This Western Digital Black is about a third faster than the drive that's in here. And I'm just curious if we see those same numbers. If we're hitting 860, then it's a limitation somewhere in the drivers of the laptop. I must have something that needs to be tweaked. Because I know if I put this in another machine, I have in past experience seen 1,000 out of it. So let's switch back over now that we've got that plugged in. Turn that off, back to Crystal Disk. 64-bit. Yep, it's the D drive. We'll just hit all on here and see if we're going to be in. I really want to see close to 1,000. Like I said, feel a little better if we're in the 860s. That tells me there's nothing wrong with the unit itself or the cable. Yep. Okay. So that is consistent through what this laptop's USB-C Gen 2. I believe it's Gen 2. Maybe it's Gen 1. That could be my problem. I'd have to look up the specs of my Dell XPS 15. Very interesting. I wonder if the streaming computer has a Gen 3.1. Let's see. Let me look on the back here. Oh, it does. Let me plug it in. We'll see how this works. So I've plugged the other unit into the back of the streaming computer that I'm using to stream broadcast to you on. I'm going to run the Crystal Disk Mark software on it. I have to locate the Crystal Disk Mark software in my I realize you guys are watching the laptop while I do. There's nothing to watch at this point. I'm just going to start Crystal Disk Mark. Yeah, it's the E drive, and I'll just do the sequential on it. See what numbers I see. See what numbers I see? Yeah. Oh, these numbers are pathetic. So on the streamer, which is a Ryzen system, this must be USB 3.1 only. It's running at about 452 megabytes a second. So I can get about 450 out of a high-end SanDisk Extreme Pro USB flash drive. So the only advantage, if you don't have a USB 3.1 Gen 2, the only advantage to going this route is it's cheaper per gigabyte, first of all. Like I said, it's upgradable and replaceable as far as replacing the drive if you have to. And the capacity is much larger. You generally don't see terabyte or 2 terabyte USB flash drives. And if you do, they're very large. And of course, with it not being repairable or upgradable, it's a lot of money. So If you're just looking for a fast, you know, like in this case, it's just 500 gigs, you can pick up a 500 gig flash drive, although those are typically pretty large. You can still get a normal size flash drive at about 256 gigs. And I'm talking fast ones. I'm not just saying when I'm mentioning these capacities of drives, I am talking about the versions that'll go 400 to 500 megabytes a second. I realize there are cheap flash drives out there with large capacities that are slow as molasses, and I don't have any interest in those. So when I speak of it, I am speaking of an equivalent to a USB enclosure. If you don't care about capacity, and if you don't mind paying a bit more per gigabyte, and you don't mind that it's not upgradable, and when it fails out of warranty, you throw it away. So again, the advantage with the solid state enclosure is that ability to change out the drive if need be. And yeah, 450 on the reads and the writes is what I'm getting out of just USB 3. So I have no doubt that if it's plugged into a USB 3.1 Gen 2 that's configured properly, I'm not sure why mine isn't, you could expect to see nearly at or around 1,000 megabytes per second. So the link for this product is in the video notes below the video. This is the Sabrent unit. Oops. Shouldn't have done that. It was still busy when I unplugged it. Now, generally, you don't have to worry about corruption when you do that, but it's possible. So now I'm worried that I might have just corrupted this. I want to plug it back in and make sure I didn't just kill it. I wasn't paying attention. I thought it was done. It was taking longer than I expected. Let's just take a quick look in here. And yeah, it has some files on it that Crystal Dismark was using, it appears. But yes, if you add important files, you absolutely want to make sure that the device is not reading or writing, especially not writing any data when you unplug it. And a lot of people don't understand that sometimes, even though you haven't selected to put any data on it, Windows may be putting system restore files on it or temp files on it without your knowledge or consent necessarily. It sees the storage, it might just use it. So that's why you would always go down to that bottom right corner and select to disconnect. But you don't necessarily have to do that if you're certain there's no read or writes taking effect. So this is the Sabrent unit. And then the other one that I've got plugged into the streamer, today's unit from Plugable, has a $10 off coupon as of today, October 2nd, 2019, at Amazon.com. Please use the link in my video notes if you're interested in picking one of these up, so you can get it as cheap as $40. Put any NVMe M.2, not SATA M.2. It's got to be an NVMe, also known as PCI 3x4 or by 4. And it'll work regardless of the manufacturer or the capacity. It will simply work in here. Very lightweight, especially compared to the Sabrent unit. Just to give you an idea between these two, this one weighs about 5 times heavier. I'm not sure why. This one's just a little bit longer, but a lot skinnier. And it sells for about, this one's about $20 more. So why pay more if your performance is going to be the same? The install on this was pretty simple. With this one, you have to remove 4 screws. And you do need a very tiny screwdriver for that. And then a screw holds the M.2 drive in. The folks over at Plugable really thought outside of the box with this and took advantage of the fact that you shouldn't need any screws or screwdrivers. This should be a toolless design. This is not a motherboard. We don't have to install components in an external enclosure the same way we have to install them in a motherboard. And this is evidence of that. And so once again, I can just slide that switch right there, slide it forward. Lid just opens up. I'm just curious if I can put it in the other way. Nope, it goes either way. So as long as you make sure you have the arrows indicated, it doesn't matter if it's 180 degrees around. You just can't put the top in where the switch goes, because when you take the switch out, you end up with a hollow tube, right? So it seems like when I was putting it in, I just grabbed the first end I saw, and it won't go in, and never force anything. It should just sort of align and then slide in. then it locks. And then the other cable that comes with it is if you don't have one of these little USB Type-C connectors, then they've got one that's Type-C into here, because it has to be, and then it's just a traditional Type-A. And the Type-A is just your standard USB connector that we're all familiar with. And of course, Type-A is limited. I don't think you can go the speeds of USB 3.1 Gen 2 without a Type-C. Could be wrong. Pretty sure. Not exactly sure. But regardless of that, very, very happy with this device. I think this is a brilliant design. I want to thank the people over at Plugable for sending me this to review, because as far as installation goes, nothing was easier than this. This is the way it's supposed to be. There were what appeared to be some heat transfer pads that were included in the box, which I'm not using because I'm just going to take this right back. But I might have to pick up a cheap Intel 660p NVMe M.2 drive for that and put it in there. Essentially, you can, just to give you some numbers, the cheapest I've seen the Intel 660p 2 terabyte was $174 on sale. And then let's say this has $10 off and you buy this for $30, you've got 2 terabytes of external storage that fits in your pocket for, what's the math on that? $215? Am I getting that math right? Under $220 anyway. Now compare that to other 2 terabyte external storage devices that are solid state. And if they'll do, as we demonstrated here, 860 megabytes a second on the reads and the writes. You get what you pay for. And I think that's about the lowest price per gig with the fastest performance and the smallest package that's available today as of October 2nd, 2019. You keep hearing me repeat the date because people watch my videos from 10 years ago and they think I just made them. I'm trying to make it a point to tell the date since people aren't reading them. Because this video, someone may be watching it in 2025 and be like, that seems awfully small and expensive compared to what's available, 6 years from now. All right, so let me switch back over my video feed here so I can see you guys and address any questions you might have. Let me just, stepping in, Lyle. Good job, buddy. Good boy. Where are you? Okay. I am going to just look through if anybody has any questions about these devices or external storage in general. Is there any way of locking these similar to a Western Digital external SSD? You can encrypt them. I'm not sure what you mean by locking. Are you worried about using it to disinfect a computer and you're worried about software being written to it, like a virus being written to it? If so, I know there are some software solutions out there. However, it doesn't have like a lock, like a right lock button. Usually, and to be clear, those are usually limited to smaller USB flash drives that are used specifically for security reasons. Not necessarily a large vault of data that's then locked, because that would defeat the purpose of having so much storage space. So in general, those right lockable devices are smaller in capacity to be used at that specific purpose. You remove the virus or the threat, then you plug in your other drive to back up your hundreds or thousands of gigs a day. Though it wouldn't hurt for them to add it, it does create support calls. I can't tell you the number of customers. They're like, my flash drive won't write data anymore. I'm like, let me take a look at it. Oh, you see this little switch? Yeah, flip it the other way. I didn't know that was there. So you can imagine when companies make things lockable, it increases their support calls quite a bit. So it's quite understandable why tools like that are often aimed and marketed specifically towards technicians or technical people, and they generally cost more because they're simply not they cost more to make because they're not making enough of them. Thank you for the question. Any other questions about storage or backing up, anything related to this device? I'd be happy to take those questions. And then once we're through with that, we can get on to more general questions if you'd like to do that. Rich Robbins believes I'm having some kind of a driver issue. Funny thing, Rich, you know, I had recently, I had that laptop with me while I was in Michigan. And there were 2 BIOS updates. Like one BIOS update happened on its own. Dell has like this update center. And then after I did that, because I couldn't get the Thunderbolt driver to up. Kept failing and failing and failing. Then it says, oh, there's a BIOS update. Do you want it? I'm like, yeah, did that. And it says, hey, there's a new BIOS update. Do you want that one? I'm like, yes. Then it said, oh, now your Thunderbolt driver's up to date. Everything looks happy. And I checked with the latest Intel chipset drivers. I mean, I went through it with a fine-tooth comb, making sure that everything was updated. And I'm still having that limitation. So it's not a big deal. It does bother me a little bit as to why I'm not seeing the numbers I should be seeing. There could be a BIOS setting that I have to tweak. I just find it hard to believe it would be a driver issue, but something's definitely not quite right. It's very close to being right. So I just need to have the time to play around with it. See Bill Otherland has joined us again. Hey, Bill, it's good to see you so regularly, my friend. Sharon Idles contributed £5. Says Arizona to Michigan and beyond. Uncle Carey rocks the USA. Right on. Thank you, Sharon. Knit Jim says, hey, that's pretty neat, although I'd rather have it on my motherboard rather than an external drive. Yes, well, it depends on what your needs are. So as a servicing technician, I need to have tools available that I need right then and there. I need to go quickly. I'm billing customers by the hour. They don't want me sitting there searching around trying to find a utility. If I have to move a customer's data from, say, they're getting a new computer, I need something to move the data to. So I always have a large capacity hard drive with me. But now I'm switching over to a large capacity SSD because they're less prone to failure. I don't have to worry about bumping it or knocking it, you know, as it's used. And they operate much faster than an external hard drive. So obviously, when we're plugging hard drives into our motherboards, we're not plugging them into USB. USB is a slower interface than your hard drive controller built onto your board. And so is your network. Your network is operating much, much slower than the data transfer rate of a solid state drive. So there are little bottlenecks here and there. This is the state of our external data transfer at this time, but it is evolving really quickly with USB 4 already in development. We'll see speeds continue to grow and grow. The technology just keeps doubling itself. So even another doubling of what we got, if we went from, let's say, 40 megabits to 80 megabits, would be the much larger leaps that we're taking. So that's just a little matter of time. The irony, right? To go faster, you have to wait just a welcome to life. But still, turning your nose up at 850 megabytes per second, that's come a long way from 720 megabyte floppy disk, right? Perspective is everything. John Tam says, Carey, I have an excellent use for this enclosure. As you mentioned in a previous video, that I can clone my OS to another larger NVMe drive and then swap them out. Yeah, absolutely, you can do that. Or you could just use Acronis to image your drive to any external storage device then swap the drive out for the new one, and then image it right back using any type of storage device. But if you want to do it quickly and you only want to have to go once, in other words, you don't want to have to create it and then read it back, you can do a direct clone into the enclosure and then swap the drive in the enclosure with the drive in the computer and the drive in the computer with the drive in the enclosure. And you've just completed your upgrade and you have a backup. So yeah, a couple different ways to accomplish that, but absolutely. Or let's say you have a customer or you have a friend or you yourself are suffering from a computer that doesn't turn on or it doesn't boot up. And now you're freaking out because even though you've heard about backups and you've been told how important they are, you didn't really think about it because it just doesn't happen to you. Now you're freaking out because you have no access to your data and you're not even sure if your data is there anymore. What do you do if all of your data and everything's on an NVMe drive mounted to your motherboard and your system won't boot or won't turn on? Well, you could get an enclosure like this, remove your NVMe drive, pop it in the enclosure, and go stick it into another working computer to at least recover your data back. Now, if you were smart, you would have backups. You would have copies of anything important so that you would never, ever find yourself in such a panic, anxiety-stricken, and completely unnecessary and avoidable circumstance. However, even in best-case scenarios, where you do have a backup, it still may be beneficial to pull the NVMe drive and check it to just see if it's okay by putting it into an external enclosure, putting it into another system, and verifying that it reads and writes correctly. So lots of different uses for these external drives for NVMe. I tend to think of how I would use it in business, but certainly there's home application use as well. Not to mention it's freaking fast. Some people don't do backups because it takes too long. Start doing your backups to an NVMe SSD externally, because backups internally aren't really backups. You've got to get the backup external and unplugged and put away somewhere. You'll find it's much less discouraging because it happens in half the time or less than what you may be accustomed to going to other external type device. And you know, with 2 terabytes available to you in storage, capacity should not be an issue. Carey, should you have added the thermal material to the drive? No, because I wasn't using it long enough for it to get that hot. No. So the reason I even anticipated I was going to be in the 800s has to do with other devices I've tested. In other words, the Sabre unit that I tested just now has that thermal material and everything, and it's a big heavy heat sink, and it performed exactly the same. So the performance numbers that we're seeing are not thermal, not a result of any thermal. And again, the benefit of testing another unit and a different cable was to ensure neither the unit nor the cable or the drive itself were part of that equation. There's something about the laptop that's limiting it, and it may be just the chipset the laptop has. Maybe that's how fast that particular chipset runs. It would require a little bit of research. So I don't have the answer for that right now. But if I'm getting 850 like I've received with other devices, then I know this device is performing as well as the others. And when I plug the others into like a Intel NUC that has the USB Type-C, I am getting 1,000 out of the others. So I would very much expect to get 1,000 out of this as well. I have no reason to believe it wouldn't. It's always going to depend on what USB port you're plugging it into. And I'm sure most of you watching do not have USB 3.1 Gen 2 ports. So while you're nitpicking on me, you probably don't even have one. So this will resolve in time, but as of October 2nd, 2019, it is pretty rare that I run into a customer that has a machine new enough that supports USB 3.1 Generation 2. That's not to say none of my customers do. That is to say it's pretty rare when I encounter it. So most of you watching will not be able to achieve even the 800 that you've seen me do. However, you will be able to grow into it as you expand your hardware, or if you buy, like Silverstone makes add-in cards for USB 3.1 Gen 2, you just plug it into a spare PCI Express slot, and it makes it available on the back of your computer, and then that would help you achieve those speeds. It just depends how much money you want to spend to get yourself there. So hello to Colin Helton, William Dawson, Greg Foster, Jay Toy, Alhaj Tepej, and Reverend John O'Toole joining us. Greg Foster, hello, hello, everybody. Adam Burdick says, Carey, have you seen Intel's new CPU lineup? Yes. Intel's sort of struggling right now. They've basically done a refresh again, a refresh of a refresh, when they would normally be introducing, like 10 nanometer chips, but they're having some issues getting those chips out. So I'm not real excited about anything coming from Intel or AMD. Nothing is exciting to me with regards to that status as of today. It's just more of the same. So nothing terrible, nothing so great I have to upgrade. Nothing is impressing me. They're just very minor 5% improvements, maybe 6% improvements. Even on AMD's side, the performance improvements are not that great over the previous generation. They're greater than Intel's previous, but all Intel's doing is a refresh, whereas AMD has a whole new platform. And also, depending on what system you've got now, you might argue with me and say, oh, the new AMD platform's 30% faster than something you have. But going from one generation to the next, the performance to me is not worth the cost of a new motherboard, new chip. And then somebody's going to say, well, these motherboards are backwards compatible if you get the BIOS update. Yes. And you know what else you could do? You could also go buy a brand new 200 mile an hour tires and stick them on your 100 mile an hour car. The point is that if you're going to do the upgrade, you should take full advantage of what the CPU can do, rather than limit it by cheaping out and keeping your same old motherboard and doing a BIOS update. There's a difference between does it work and does it work as good as it possibly can, efficiently. And that being said, the difference between this new Intel generation of chips is particularly low in performance compared to the previous gen. So I wouldn't even consider them, to be honest, unless they just become the same price. I don't know. I have no reason to select them. 5% is nothing these days. What else do we have here in the chat room? Jitesh says, if I were to purchase this enclosure, I'd definitely use a 128 gig of booting up for Ubuntu on my PC. Yeah, you certainly could do that. Jamie Munoz wants to know if anyone was talking about the death of computer repair. I talked about that at length on Monday's show. If you go back and watch Monday's show, I think I covered that I think I talked about it for about 45 minutes. So rather than have everybody endure me talking about it all over again, please watch Monday's show. John Times says, I purchased from Acronis, but I have to call tech support as it doesn't recognize that I have an external drive. It shows up in this PC, but it will back up. There's probably something really simple about that. And if you look at the interview that I did with Acronis, with Bagaudan from Acronis, Bagaudan is the community resource manager, and he's the guy that hangs out in the Acronis Reddit support forum and gives you official answers from Acronis. So you don't even have to contact Acronis technical support. If you look at the video notes of my interview with Acronis, there is a Reddit link to the Acronis forum where Bagaudan regularly monitors and participates. And I'm absolutely certain he can help you solve this problem. It is probably something very, very simple. Greg Foster, thank you for your kind words. I appreciate that. Okay, any other questions, guys? Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this stream. And then what I'll do is I'll start another just hangout session for you guys if you just want to hang out. But at least this way, I can send this link to the folks over at Plugable, and they can take a look at it. And also give my sister a break on editing. Right? So any final questions about the backup process of using a device like this, understanding what the benefits are, the costs, the savings, all the things I keep repeatedly saying: upgradable, repairable. If your drive were to die, you could replace the drive. Currently $10 off at Amazon. There's a little box you got to check for a $10 coupon. It's normally $49.95. With $10 off, you'd be $39.95. Put any NVMe drive in it of any capacity. No tools required. It works in any USB, whether you've got USB 1, USB 2, USB 3, USB 3.1 Gen 1, USB 3.1 Gen 2. It works in all of them. It only works as fast as the USB port that you plug it into. So if you've only got USB 2 and you think this is going to go faster for you than whatever you're using now, it won't until you upgrade your USB to something faster, which is possible. You don't have to change out your whole motherboard. As I mentioned, there are USB add-in cards. And if I were you, I'd get the fastest, which is USB 3.1 Gen 2. As long as you have a slot available in your computer, it should be fine. Carey, do you use Elgato HD60 for your streams? No, I do not. I use a capture card, which a viewer provided to me. And it's a 4-port HDMI 1080 $900 PCI Express internal capture card from a company called Magewell. Magewell? Yeah. And if you are interested in any of the things you see in my videos, whether it's the Lazy Susan turntable, the screwdrivers, the cameras, the tripods, the memory cards, the batteries, the battery chargers, the mouse and keyboard, the cordless drivers, the capture cards, all of that is listed. If you look in my video notes, there's a link to an Amazon store. It says, here's everything you see in my videos. And when you click on that link, there's over 100 items of all the little things that I use here, because I get buried with those questions. And so I've just solved them all with one link. So please, please check out the video notes below the video. I think you'll find most questions regarding where stuff is or how much something costs should be found in there. If not, let me know and I'll be sure to add it. Should I avoid motherboards that don't have my solid state drive listed on its quality vendor list? So what a QVL or a quality vendor list is it's verification from the manufacturer of a motherboard that they've tested certain RAM, usually it's RAM, that, you know, this RAM, this specific make and model of RAM has been tested by the motherboard manufacturer and has passed all tests. That doesn't mean that they've tested all RAM and these are the ones that passed. They tested some RAM, and of the RAM they tested, these passed. Now, they might have done that test a year ago. Some of that RAM may not even be available anymore. There's no such thing as an SSD QVL list. Never heard of such a thing. And if it does exist, it's all based on imagination. It'd be like saying, should I only buy USB flash drives that are on the QVL list, if there was such a thing, for my motherboard's USB ports? The USB is a standard that has to be followed in order to use the term USB. SATA and NVMe have to follow SATA and NVMe standards in order to be labeled as SATA or NVMe. Therefore, if anything is SATA or NVMe, it will work with any motherboard that supports SATA or NVMe. Any USB device will work in any USB port, regardless of the manufacturer, as long as you give it enough voltage to it, right? Some USB ports, like at the front of the computer, don't necessarily provide all the voltage, and you may find some devices only work on the back of the computer for that reason. That being said, there's no such thing as a QVL list, as far as I know, for anything other than RAM, because there's so many variations of the CAS latency and so many factors in memory, in the DDR4 memory especially, that can make it an issue as motherboards require are more sensitive or less tolerant to certain ways, the performance specifications of the selected RAM you've selected. So the short answer is no. No, you don't have to worry about it. If it's an SSD and you've got the port on your motherboard, it's compatible, guaranteed. No such thing as an incompatible SSD. if you try to plug an NVMe drive in a SATA port, that's not compatible. But I feel like I need to say that before somebody says that to me. These things should be common sense. So what do I have here? Rob Fudicia says, thank you for this great review with a very handy device. I appreciate all your advice. Right on, thank you. And Jimmy Welbert says, I just contributed $20 via the donate button at tech-vets.com. Thank you for supporting the channel. I appreciate that very, very much. All right, guys, I don't see any other questions coming in with regards to the storage. So I'm going to go ahead and end this stream. I will come back with a new stream here after about a 5-minute break. And I hope you'll come back and we'll just have a little hangout and chit chat. Thanks for watching. Of course, I will see you all again very, very soon. Until then, bye for now.